to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Ryan Gable. First, a couple of announcements. Check out our new show. It happened May the 4th. That's available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Watch the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana. That is available on Tubi, Roku channel, and many other platforms. Get yourself a Rokfin premium membership. That'll get you access to all of our premium content at rokfin.com/FKN+. And if you listen to the podcast through any audio podcast platform, listen through Spreaker. That's always free for you, and it helps us out a ton. Today I want to welcome back to the show Ryan Gable. He is a veteran radio personality and producer for The Secret Teachings. His broadcasts focus on the synchronicity and objective analysis of parapsychology, pop conspiracy, parapolitics, health, history, the paranormal, symbolism, esoteric, the occult, alchemy, magic, philosophy, and much more in the most distinct ways by finding parallels and patterns often overlooked. Ryan, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks so much for coming back on, man. Always a great discussion. And today we're going to once again analyze the reality theater that we're presented as a mechanism for control and division, usually, and the extreme polarities are being presented as if they're the only options, and it seems that there's an end goal that appears more and more to be as this epic duel between the polarities: good, evil, black, white, Coke, Pepsi, God, Satan, Trump, or Kamala. And those of us that opt out of the madness seem to be more and more the enemy of both of those polarities. So we're at an interesting point with how everything has unfolded, and it's becoming more and more difficult to navigate the conspiratorial waters. But it's an interesting time, and you always do great work looking behind the theatrics, analyzing the symbolism of some of these large-scale events, which we're going to discuss a bit today. Before we do, remind the audience a little bit about yourself and your show.
Yeah, well, these are all things that are right up my alley, everything that you just mentioned. So my show is called The Secret Teachings. I've done it for about 10 to 11 years, but I've been on radio for 15, so I probably had about 4 or 5 years of practice before I really started my show. And it developed into something where I tried to be as objective as possible, painstakingly objective, which means that some shows I might lean a little bit more to one side and other shows a little bit more to the other side. But when you put it all together, I'm trying to bring balance to everything. Doesn't matter what the subject is. And my specialty is symbolism and applying symbolism to everything. Doesn't matter what the subject is. It could be health, it could be the Olympics, it could be the Super Bowl, it could be just politics in general, or it could be the supernatural, whatever the case is. I try to apply symbolism and mythology, and I look at a little bit of everything, Chris. Try to figure out what's going on from every angle, and try to find a new angle on things, rather than kind of what you're alluding to, rather than just taking one side of things or the other, which I do find to be increasingly difficult, because, I mean, within a group, like within Christianity or within Islam or within some religion somewhere in the world, there's different denominations, and everybody has their own kind of way of viewing it. And I think that is kind of like a language, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, even if I disagree with the belief system. But that's not really my business to disagree. It's not my belief system. I don't really care. I'm more interested in learning about why people see things differently, and I'm not really trying to push an idea, but within whatever the group is, it is very difficult to say, well, I'm not against you, but I'm not necessarily with you. I see what you're saying, but could you also look at it this way? I think the big problem is it's really difficult to do that and then to still maintain some kind of relationship with people, because most of us just want to sort of live in the harmony and the peace of I guess I would say, of an ideology. So to answer your question, I try to really focus on that in all of my work, whatever the subject matter is.
Yeah. Well, we've reached such an incredible point in, it seems like, consciousness evolution, where we're really pushing to try and understand some greater concepts at this point in our reality, and there's more and more of us that are at least becoming aware that there's a fundamental problem with a lot of what we rely on in the mainstream and what we rely on as far as some of our institutions. And that seems to have this ripple effect to where more and more people, once they become aware of that aspect, they start to pay attention to other things in their lives. And this has this powerful 100th monkey effect. And unfortunately, the point we're at now, it seems to be that there's so much growth at this time and so much information to decipher through that there's a lot of confusion, a lot of fear, and a lot of people are probably not sure where to go with all this. So this is great that we can actually come here and discuss these things and maybe try and get a better overall perspective of what's going on. I know you've been looking at some of the bigger events unfolding lately, and you sent me a message about the Olympics and some of the other parallel events that are unfolding right now that are causing division. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in some of those events like the Olympics and what we're tuning into basically as this theater.
Okay, I think that that's a good subject to begin with. Let me preface by giving you a couple of examples that I think are small in comparison to the Olympics, and then we can kind of build up to that. So, and based on your original question, I think that comes into play as well. So let's look at, for example, before we get to the Olympics, wildfires in the United States. I know I first noticed this when we had those fires in Lahaina and Maui, and you had one side of the media, mostly the mainstream, saying that this was climate change. You had the alternative media saying, no, it's not climate change. It's directed energy weapons, and it's geoengineering. And I said, well, those things exist, but I don't think that that's what caused these fires. Oh, but they're very suspicious. Well, sure, maybe they're suspicious. It might also be not that the fires are suspicious. It might be more so that the way that massive corporations react to stealing essentially, or gobbling up the land in a disaster, that might seem suspicious. Sure, no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean some kind of geoengineering DEW was used. Again, not that that doesn't exist. So I kind of noticed it then when I was told some really nasty things by some of my listeners that they weren't going to listen to me anymore because I denied the truth of DEWs. And I thought, I didn't. I read them on Boeing's website, Raytheon's website, Lockheed Martin's website. I just don't buy what the alternative media is selling. But I don't buy the mainstream media either. I thought it was negligence, just like what happened in Paradise, California, where in court it came out that the power company was largely responsible for the fire because they did not take care of the power lines. So people want to believe in climate change or geoengineering, DEW weapons. Like, again, there's a little bit of truth to both sides of that, but that then allows the company that was negligent, and of course the government in California that's negligent and doesn't want to do forest work, it allows them to get away quite literally with murder. So that's an example of, and I started thinking more like that with every issue, and I thought the same thing with, I don't know what I can and can't say for
You can
your
say whatever
stream,
you
but
want for this stream, man. No
okay.
limits here.
Well, I didn't mean that in terms of censorship. I just meant that in terms of I didn't want to say a keyword and you got kicked off of
Oh,
some platform. But
go for it.
okay, well, it's the same thing with
Yeah.
vaccines, right? I never took a vaccine for COVID. I don't get my flu shot. I'm one of those
Yeah. Yeah.
people. I'm kind of an old school hippie liberal type of a person. Honestly, that's how I live
Right.
my life. But I don't think that everybody is having cancer diagnosis because of
Right.
COVID
Right. Right. Right.
vaccines. And I think that's true because we saw massive spikes in cancer long before COVID vaccines. That doesn't mean that they can't contribute to them, but I don't think that that's what the main cause of the massive increase in cancer and cardiovascular disease and diabetes and all these other things are. And on the other hand, what do people say cancer is caused by? Well, it's not caused by the vaccine. It must be caused by the sun. It's the sun's fault. That's kind of like the climate change version of it, right? It's the sun's fault. It's the UV radiation, which like sure, yeah, there's truth to that. I just don't think the cancer is caused by vaccines or it's caused by the sun. I think it's caused by our diets and things that we interact with in the environment. And once again, that allows companies and that allows massive lumbering corporations. Not that I'm opposed to corporations making profit. I hope Tesla makes another $1 trillion and I hope Apple makes another $1 trillion. But I'm saying that I think these companies can get away, once again, quite literally with murder by focusing on things that have nothing at all to do with the root source of the problem. But there's a market for that. There's a market for climate change. There's a market for the sun did it. There's a market for its vaccines that did it. And there's also a market for, oh, you don't actually have heart disease. You just got SARS-CoV-2 and it's the virus that's making your heart go crazy. It's the virus that made you have a stroke. It's the virus that made you fat. It's the virus. It's the vaccine. It's like, no, it's the lifestyle on average. So I say that because I think that those are kind of I mean, they're large macrocosmic examples if we look at them individually. But in terms of the Olympics, I would consider them microcosmic because the Olympics is such a massive event. It's a global event to the point where I think they estimated during the Tokyo Olympics, close to half the world's population watched. That's a lot
Yeah.
of people. It was like 3.4 billion or something. It was over 3 billion. I don't know what the exact numbers were. That's a lot of people that watched them. That's like half the world's population. So it's a lot of
Yeah.
people, right? Way more than the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So same kind of a thing happened during the Olympics. Um, I like the Olympics mostly. I mean, I enjoy watching hockey when there's the Winter Olympics. Um, I got into water polo a couple of years ago. I watched the water polo matches. I like watching football or soccer. Sometimes I watch basketball games. But my point is, I kind of like the Olympics, but I understand the history of the Olympics. I've I even wrote a history book where I talked a little bit about World War II in the book as an introduction to the overall subject matter. So I've studied that quite a bit in my life. I have a whole library of books on that. So yeah, I understand that 1936 Berlin, most of the modern Olympic Games, the way that we view them and the way that they're portrayed are derived from Leni Riefenstahl, and it's derived from the Nazi Party trying to glorify and trying to propagandize the public to accept what Hitler wanted, and that was a united world, a united European Union, which we eventually got without Hitler anyway, just with other countries controlling it. That's a whole other story. But yeah, I understand that's where a lot of it comes from. It's obviously also the old Greek Olympic Games and the parallel games called the Pythian Games or the Serpent Games, the Pythian Games, which were those of Apollo and the Python in the myth, which relate to the Oracle of Delphi because that's where the Python was. So like I'm aware of all that, but I still like the Olympics. I think the mythology and the history is really fascinating. But what I don't like is when there's the opening ceremony, and before the opening ceremony, like, sure, I'm going to look at it because it's global and there's going to be symbolism. Everything is symbolism. There's symbolism in the background of your video
Yeah.
right now, and in back, these are all kanji here on my wall. These are all symbols, right? Everything's a symbol. The color of my shirt is a symbol. So yeah, there's going to be symbols, but that doesn't mean that they're satanic. It doesn't mean that the Illuminati put them there. It doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that the Masons were
Yeah.
involved, right? So that's the mindset you have going into it, or you have the mindset of that's all crazy. There's no such thing as symbols. Like basically, symbols don't exist. There's no meaning to any of this. It's just an opening ceremony because we want to watch some international sport. And I think that likewise, you go into it with that mindset, which I think the majority of people do, and you don't see the subtle things. Even, and this is the point, even admittedly symbolic things. Like, for example, the Olympic logo, you saw the Olympic logo, the woman's hair and the lips. That's not something that conspiracy theorists found. That's not something that the average person just, glossed over. It was what the French government said. They designed the logo to be Marianne or Marianne, the goddess of freedom and liberty. Basically, Our Lady Libertas, or the Latin Libertas, or Our Lady Liberty, our Statue of Liberty. So, like, they openly just said, yeah, we designed the logo to represent Marianne. And the French government said we decided to have the opening ceremony on the river Seine, I believe is how you pronounce it. And it was the first time they'd ever had the opening ceremony outside of the stadium, and they had it on the river. And if you look at I guess it would be French mythology, or the tradition of personifying nature as a deity, the river Seine is actually personified as a goddess named Sequana, and she's directly related to, well, Marianne. So you see those two symbols; those are just on the surface. That's what the French government, the Olympic Committee, that's what they said it was meant to be. It's not a conspiracy, and it's not just, oh, it's there's no symbolism at all. It's just some opening ceremony and that's it. That's what the government and that's what the Olympic Committee said that it was supposed to be. Okay, so my point with all that being said is that you have people going into it looking for some kind of demonic, satanic, Illuminati
Right.
symbolism. And a lot of that I've noticed, I don't think I've ever noticed this until recently, like really recently, like just the Olympics, that I've noticed that there's a very heavy, I never thought this very clearly before, but there's a very heavy fundamentalist Christian segment within the conspiracy. I mean,
Mm.
I knew that there was kind of a Christian angle
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
things, but like it's a very malicious, in my what I experienced over the last couple of weeks, like malicious Christian element within the conspiracy minded groups, I guess you could call
Right.
them, where everything is the same two or three verses from the
Mm.
Bible. Like if they see a horse, it must be the horse of
Hmm.
Revelation. It couldn't be that the government of France and that the Olympic Committee said that the horse on the river was meant to be ridden by Sequana, the goddess of the river, who rides animals just like Diana or Artemis because she's a goddess of nature. And you can say, well, that's not what it meant. They were lying to us. It was really the horse of the apocalypse. I just don't understand. It's not even like the book of Revelation is being referenced outside of one or two verses. It's just the same verses. And behold, a pale horse. I'm like, the horse wasn't pale, it was
Mm.
silver. And a silver horse, in all of my symbol books, a silver horse is the horse of the moon. It's the horse of the moon goddess, which would, of course, the moon controls water. So, yes, it would be the horse of Sequana or
Mm.
Marianne. So that checks out because that's the logo, that's the river, and the horse is that of the moon. Plus, who performed on the Eiffel Tower? Celine Dion. Celine is the moon goddess. That's literally the name of the moon goddess, Celine, spelled in different ways. And there was a very viral photo of the Eiffel Tower with where they had the Olympic rings under it. I don't know if you, did you see this, where they had the moon was
No, I didn't see it.
photographed in the middle of the rings. So really, it was just like it's a really, really good
Mm.
picture. The moon was in the middle of the rings, and it was right under the Eiffel Tower. And I think it was after Celine performed. So here you have again Celine, the moon goddess, on the Eiffel Tower, which is, reaching up into heaven, drawing down the moon, which was right underneath of the Eiffel Tower. So when you start to look at it from that, this is how I looked at it. I just tried to figure out what these different things officially were and what other people were seeing. I don't see the horse of Revelation. I don't see the book of Revelation. I do in some
Hmm.
things, but I didn't see that. I saw Marianne. I saw Sequana. I saw Celine. I saw a pattern, a parallel pattern of goddesses that were linked to water, the moon, and
Hmm.
birth. And then the very opening of the ceremony, Chris, was you had these people that took kids down into the catacombs of the city with the torch. You can see all the skeletons and whatnot. And there's like what's 5, 6, 7 million skeletons down there, they estimate. And they put them on a boat, and then they exited the tunnel. There's like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they exited the tunnel through like on water on a boat. Well, there's a couple of things going on there. I mean, the underworld or the afterlife, you're on a boat, whether that's in Greece or that's in Egypt or anywhere else in the world. You're on a boat, you're on water, you go through the different divisions, and the torch lights your way. And then you go down, when you're born, you go down the birth canal, which is what was in that opening scene. And then you are birthed, you follow the light, you go toward the light, and that's the birthing portal into the physical world when a baby is born. So it was a resurrection ritual, which all again has to do with the motif of the goddess. So if you look at it from that point of view, which is not really a point of view that's structured, I'm just simply looking at like, okay, there's Mariana, there's Sequana, there's Celine, there's a birthing ritual. Okay, this clearly has to do with the
Hmm.
goddess. And then they put Isis. I don't know if you saw this. There was a giant Isis head, like the goddess in Egypt. There was a giant Isis head in the river. So it clearly was meant to represent the goddess. And if you look at images of Isis, I'd say probably the most famous image of Isis is the image of her with the red background, the veil, and she is holding a boat because she is the goddess of water and childbirth and rivers like the Nile, and she's holding scales in the other hand, which relate to the weighing of the soul and the heart, the feather and the heart in Egypt, but also it's something that Jesus holds scales in some images. Saint Michael holds scales. The black horse of the apocalypse does indeed hold scales. So if there's any relationship to the black horse or to the Revelation story and the horses, it would come through the Isis imagery. It wouldn't come through the actual horse itself, which was again silver. Although there was a white horse with wings, but I didn't hear anybody point this out. The white horse with wings is not the Revelation horse, because the white horse is spring. The white horse with wings is the Pegasus. And the Pegasus is used to kill who? Medusa. And Medusa was done. What happened to Medusa? She had her head cut off, just like Marie Antoinette. So that imagery is all over the Olympics, all over the Olympics. And you get, instead of that, it's revelation, it's, devil worship, it's the Illuminati. And I get tired of
Well,
that. And
it's
if I
not
sit here and try to
sexy. It's
explain
not
this,
fantastical. We're presented
that's it.
with
Yep.
what comes out of the performance, and whatever true meaning it has is really irrelevant. What happens is it's presented, and either one person or 1,000 people will come to a certain conclusion, and if those individuals or groups have a powerful enough voice, this takes on a life of its own, and it spreads like wildfire, and it becomes a new understanding and a new misunderstanding. And unfortunately, this has been happening so much, and it's been compounded event after event, year after year for the past few years. And on top of that, we have the AI art with the Chat GPT fake stories behind it and all the deceptions that are coming out from every angle. It is an era of madness and mass confusion, and I can see how that can be very dangerous for whatever the next step may be for us. But overall, it seems like to me, if I can step back and look at everything, and I'm an optimist, and I also have a strong spiritual foundation. For me, if I look back at everything, there may be this greater force guiding humanity. Call it consciousness. Call it a collective consciousness that no longer desires to be bamboozled and fooled and trapped within this system. But what happened was we allowed it to unfold. We gave it permission to unfold for centuries. And it took a large-scale slap in the face collectively for us to start to realize that we've been allowing this system to lead us in certain directions. And it seems like whatever the system is having a reaction to the awakening, and it's causing mass chaos, presenting the different polarities. Like you said earlier, it seems like if you don't align with the extremes, it becomes very difficult for you to navigate some of these waters. So it is a very interesting phenomena, and I do have to wonder if there is some sort of greater force at play, that maybe it is just the collective consciousness that wants to pull up its big boy pants and have some accountability for once.
I get the gist of what you're saying, and it seems like there certainly is some sort of I would call it some sort of counterintelligence movement that almost trolls people with this kind of stuff. It really feels like people are being trolled by the imagery, by the ritual, ceremonial aspects of things like the Olympics. And in fact, that's not just my opinion. And I should also say that I'm all the stuff that I just pointed out about the Olympics. It doesn't mean that I'm right. I mean, the symbols are there, so I mean that's clearly factual. But the overall overarching theme is not something that I can tell you I know for sure if there is one.
Right.
There are certain facts that are facts, and that's just the bottom line. But I think that there's the evidence of trolling can be found also in the Olympics, and there's different, I guess, forms of trolling, but some of them are more obvious. The guy that put the Olympic ceremony together, the guy that was the director of it, Thomas Jolly, openly admitted that the ceremony was meant to mock Christians. Now, that was the opening of the Last Supper, right? And the blue character, Dionysus, playing the part, right? So he openly, I mean, they denied it at first, and then he came out and said, yeah, that is what it was supposed to be. I was influenced by that imagery, and I wanted to, he said it was meant to mock the Last Supper. Okay, and then the woman that played Jesus, the lady with the headdress on, Barbara Butch, she also said it was meant to offend Christians. Okay, so in that case, you do actually have very blatantly, you have people that are saying that we are trolling Christians on an international stage. Now, what I find peculiar about this is that the two people that were responsible for that imagery were, in their own words, this isn't what I'm saying, okay? They're both gay Jews. And I found that peculiar. I haven't heard anybody else point that out. They're both gay Jews. Well, the woman, she calls herself a queer fat Jew. But the other guy, he's just a gay Jew. So at least that's what I've read in their social media and their bios and all that. I've read a lot about both of them. They're both gay Jews. And I thought, huh, that's weird. So two gay Jews got together and literally conspired to offend Christians and to troll Christians at the Olympics. And the Ayatollah of Iran and the president of Turkey and the Muslim countries came to the defense of Jesus and came to the defense of Christians. And Christians do not accept that. They do not want to acknowledge that the Muslim world came to the defense of Jesus while Jews mocked Jesus.
This is interesting because this speaks to a larger issue that we're facing right now. Even in politics, we're seeing theology and religion creep in, and it's becoming a very powerful driving factor in conspiracy land, basically. Like you said, a lot of the heart of a lot of this culture is Christian, and I don't have anything against Christians, although I do agree that they can be rather judgmental and close-minded, and I do align with a lot of the Christian beliefs. I think that the dogma and the way it's presented is a form of mind control. I think it always has been. I grew up in a Catholic home, and everyone that I talk to that grew up in similar, very religious Christian or Catholic homes has a level of trauma behind it. It seems to cause this deep-rooted theological dogma that causes reactions to certain situations, and it becomes so deep-rooted. That's why I think it can be a form of mind control. If you're exposed to it at such a young age, it's so powerful that what's happening is these people that are fundamentalist Christians, or they have that very powerful Christian dogma that they grew up with, are expressing it because they are being gaslighted right now, because they're being taunted right now from whatever this is. And also, whatever this is seems to have this desire to not only push to those good and evil polarities, but express, especially to the religious folks, that we are in the end times, which I find very interesting as well.
Oh, I've been talking about that on my show, The Secret Teachings, for years. I believe that there are very powerful forces. I would say the Windsor family is one of them, who play on the themes of the end times, play on the themes of the eschaton and Armageddon and all of that. And I think that's why you do actually see a lot of that imagery in pop culture. And you see, I mean, well, one, it's because just the heavy influence of religion, but I think it's also because these themes are played on. When we see these giant rituals like the weddings or the coronation of the king, or they clearly play on that imagery. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at, let's again go back to the Olympics and look at the Olympics, that's not the horse of the apocalypse. Plain and simple. That doesn't mean that you don't see that imagery elsewhere. I mean, when those two horses got free, I don't know, you remember that story, that horses got free and ran through the streets of, what was it,
Yes.
London a couple of months ago? Okay, that you can absolutely relate to Revelation, and they were one of them was covered in blood. I think it was
Now, if
that
you
was
get beyond
that was
the
not a good
Christian
element.
element, if you have eyes to see, it's more of there's a battle between paganism and Christianity and some of those older understandings. If you can get past the Satanism and some of the more modern understandings, there seems to be this revival of pagan understandings that are bursting through in our modern age. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I would say 90% of that. I've thought of that recently. I
Mm.
mentioned it on a recent show, and I thought maybe because I don't know if it's necessarily pagan in the sense that paganism means religion of the country people. It basically means a religion that's not institutionalized. So I actually did thinking about that, Chris. I was thinking about that in regard to the Olympics, and I thought, I mean, the whole Olympic opening ceremony was meant to pass the torch to the
Mm-hmm.
goddess. I mean, that's pretty much part of the imagery and also part of what the Olympic Committee in France said. But at the same time, the torch was being passed to Marianne. The same week, the opening ceremony, Joe Biden acknowledges that, okay, I can't do this. I'm going to step down. And he used a very curious word to describe how he was going to move down and give the space to Kamala Harris. He said, I'm going to pass the
Mm.
torch to the new generation, the same week that they're passing the torch to Marianne in France. Now, that might just seem like a total coincidence that it's the torch and it's the Olympic torch. There's more than that because when he passed the torch to Kamala, I don't know if you know anything about Kamala Harris, her name. You know anything
No,
about
I
her
don't.
name? This
Mm.
is weird. Okay, this just it's not my opinion. It's just a fact, and then you can do with it what you will. But it relates directly to all the same imagery we saw at the Olympics. And this is going to answer your question. I think this is my way of answering your question. I might be a
That's
little
all right. I love it.
long-winded, but I'm going to try to come back around to your question. So Kamala has two meanings in Sanskrit, at least according to scholars and dictionaries. It means lotus, but it also means pale red. Her middle name is Devi, Devi, and Devi is a character who is usually linked to Lakshmi, who is a goddess of, she's basically Athena or Minerva. She's the owl, and she wears red, like Kamala, the pale red. Devi is a goddess who, in the myth, does a dance with Shiva, the destroyer, at the end of the world. Now, of course, just to um, try to bring balance to this, the Hindu trinity or the Trimurti is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It's the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer. That's balance and necessary evil. If you get rid of the elements of creation and balance, then you only get chaos. So if we're only looking at the chaos element, then it would be maybe more evil or satanic or whatever term you want to use. Okay, if you don't have Brahma and
Mm.
Vishnu. Okay, so she does the Devi character does a dance with Shiva at the end of the world. This is really weird. When the world ends, they slay an elephant, maybe the Republican Party,
Hmm.
and
Hmm. Hmm.
they bathe in its blood. They bathe in
Hmm.
its blood, and they wear its skin, and they dance around and laugh and play, and it's the end of the world. That's Devi. So Kamala Devi in Sanskrit means the pale goddess of chaos, the pale goddess of destruction, the pale goddess of the end of the world. Okay, hear me out. When Kamala Harris became vice president, this is not me saying this, this is what the symbol dictionaries say. It's really crazy. When Kamala Harris became vice president, remember the Democrat Party turned their logo to the side
Yeah.
so that the star, you
Yeah.
remember that? The star was pointing to the east. Okay, so you got a couple of things. So you have the Eastern Star. Okay, so you could relate that certainly to Venus. But if you've read a very select few magical texts, like the book of Abramelin and the Mage, or if you've read, um, well, especially if you've read this Infernal Dictionary that I have with Colin Duplancy, and there's a handful of others. There's a every element, every side of the 4 points of the five-pointed star. The fifth point is consciousness, but the 4 points relate to one of the elements. Okay, and each of the elements in each of the four directions, like the Christian cross, has an associated spirit. So if you point the pentagram, this isn't my opinion, this is like ceremonial magic. If you point the pentagram to the east, you're calling on the Eastern spirit. Well, get this, the Eastern spirit is named Oriens. Oriens like the Orient. And the Eastern spirit, get this, arrives as there's different descriptions, of course. There's all kinds of descriptions, but it's a demon basically. So it is a decrepit old man, maybe Joe Biden, who no joke, rides a donkey, the
Oh
symbol of
my
the Democrat Party, and is
no.
followed by a crazy woman. I can't make it up. So you get that from the moment of inauguration to now she's the nominee, Kamala Devi, and the passing of the torch. The same week they're passing the torch in France, this big Olympic ceremony, this big ritual. And then furthermore, the pale woman, if you want to go to the biblical terminology, I've got a Bible over here. I love the Bible. I've read Revelation probably more than any other book except Genesis, and I like from a Christian point of view, if you're listening, I'm very familiar, yes, with the book of Revelation and the Bible, and in reading that and then relating that to Kamala Devi and the Red Goddess of Destruction. Who is that? Who's the Red Goddess of Destruction? That's the Whore of Babylon. That's Aleister Crowley's Red Woman.
Yeah.
It's also Lilith or Lamashtu. And you want to hear something really weird, Chris? If you could do this on your computer, I bet. If you go to DuckDuckGo, the search engine, let's see if it comes up in real time with you.
Yeah.
I've had four listeners confirm this. If you go to DuckDuckGo, and if you type in, tell me when you're
I
ready.
am. Oh, let's see. I'm ready.
Okay, I don't know if it's still going to come up for you. I have screenshots of all of this. And I have listeners that sent me some too. Type in Whore of Babylon verse. That's it, Whore of Babylon verse. And click enter and tell me what comes up under the news. Now, I don't know if it's going to.
Let's see.
It might have changed.
Under the
but let's see
news?
what comes up under news. Yeah.
Book of Revelation. Beautiful Babylon, Jewel of the Ancient World.
Is that on
Yes.
DuckDuckGo? Okay, it must have changed because when I did my show on this a week ago, I typed in Whore of Babylon to try to find the verse, and what I got was news articles about Kamala Harris and her stances on abortion. I have screenshots of that. It's really, really,
Nothing
really
like that is coming up on this one. Interesting.
weird. Maybe that's because
Yeah.
we pointed it out. But even if that's not the case, I just thought that was
Yeah.
weird. But the point is, what's Kamala Harris's major policy? Like her main political issue is abortion. Well, so is Lilith. Lilith is the red goddess, the red queen, queen of night, and she is the aborter of children and the tempter of men. How did Kamala Harris begin her career? Famously by being a tempter of men and sleeping with the mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. So she began her career as a political whore. She also is, well, I think, primarily concerned with abortion. That's what the New York Times, and I mean, that's if you just listen to her, all of her campaign ads are about abortion. Well, that's again the same character. That's this. It doesn't matter what you call her, whore of Babylon, drunk on the blood of the followers of Christ, or it's the Lilith or Lamashtu. And then what's another big thing, Kamala Harris? LGBTQ. Do you know what Lilith, the goddess, wears around her neck? A rainbow. Like this stuff is not coincidental,
No,
man. I think.
It can't be. No,
Oh,
I was
go
just.
ahead. Go ahead.
This can't be coincidental. Go ahead.
Oh. Well, bringing it back around to what you were asking and what we were talking with paganism and all that. I think what's happening here is I think Kamala Harris is a vessel for that queen, that goddess, that energy, that spirit. In the same way that I think that they used the Olympic ceremony to draw down the moon, in the witchcraft sense, to draw down the moon, except not into a member of the coven who has the ritual intimacy with the male member of the coven, who's the green man or the horn god, as part of a copulation ritual. I think that they're drawing down a very perverted feminine energy, because across the world, what you see is a heavy focus on the destruction of families, a heavy focus on the destruction of children, a heavy focus on a distortion of all that is good. And this takes us into another very disturbing area. Please cut me off at any time. But when you look at the two people that did that imagery at the Olympics that intended to mock
Mm.
Jesus, and then you go read the holy book of those two people, the Talmud, and what the Talmud says about Christians and what it says about Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ burns in feces, and that's not an anti-Semitic statement, that's a factual statement. I can show you in the Talmud where it says that. I have screenshots and I can pull up the text. Same thing with all Gentiles are filthy and dirty and can be killed by the fundamentalist Jews, and the Jews cannot be held
Hmm.
accountable for killing Gentiles and mocking Christ. There is a very, I'm not saying Jews. Jews are the
Right, right,
victims of
right.
this. I'm
100%.
talking about fundamentalist
Hmm.
Talmudists. These people that Winston Churchill said this in 1920. He said these people are hell bent on destroying civilization, reducing things to a state of arrested development, trying to create conditions of impossible equality, and eradicating civilization anywhere it exists in the world. This is even written about in Eliphas Levi's The History of Magic. He writes about how the same groups of people do these, and he grew up Catholic, how they do this and what their agenda is. And everybody's in the crossfire, everybody's in the
Hmm.
crosshairs. And I think a great example of that would be what's happening in Ireland and what's happening in, well, I guess it's all across the UK. You see these riots and
Yes.
protests over illegal immigration. How does the media portray that? Right wingers against Muslims. And when they show these Muslims that are attacking the right wingers and the right wingers attacking Muslims, they're wearing Antifa garb.
Yeah.
It's a communist revolution. It's not Muslims. Muslims are just in the
Yes.
crosshairs, just like Jews were in the crosshairs in the past. The Islamic world is not the enemy. They came to the defense of Christianity. What we're seeing here is whether or not Albert Pike and that letter is accurate, the final world war is going to be fought by bringing all religions into conflict with one
Yes.
another, driving them based on their divisions, and destroying all religions in order to unite the world under a one global system. I think that's
Well,
what's
that would
happening.
explain why the polarities are so important right now, why it's so important to corral people into these different belief systems, and why, if you opt out of the madness, you become a target for any of those specific belief systems.
Yeah, and they all
Yes, they
attack you.
all attack you. Also, this political season has a level of theatrics that is more than anything I've experienced in my lifetime. And it seems like it's pushing towards something in the mass consciousness that is like an apocalyptic type situation. Now, another thing you mentioned, the Jewish situation, and what's happening is another one of these polarities where we're being pushed to hate a group of people based on the
Yep.
ideologies of the powerful leaders of these certain groups. We're also seeing in the conspiracy Christian culture people who are looking back at World War II and saying, oh, maybe Hitler was doing the right thing. And it's becoming this new movement where we're looking at just all the wrong aspects of this. It's all part of this same division tactic.
Yeah, see, do you want to talk about
Yeah.
this? Because okay, we can definitely discuss this. So there's a lot of complicated
Mm.
details here.
Ah, yeah.
Number one, anti-Semitism, we should define
Mm.
that. It means being anti-Semitic, right? Semitic means that you are Semitic. You speak one of the Semitic languages. You are descendant from one of the Semitic tribes. Okay, just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you speak one of the Semitic languages. I can convert to
Hmm.
Judaism. The porn star Jenna Jameson converted to Judaism. That doesn't make her a Jew, okay, in the same way. If you read the book of Romans says that a Jew is not someone who is Jewish outwardly. A Jew is someone who is Jewish internally. Same thing with circumcision. It's not a physical thing to be performed, it's a spiritual thing in the heart to be performed. Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, he said that Israel is the state of Saturn, that their star is the Saturn star. The book of Acts says that the Saturn star, they use the word Remphan in the book of Acts, that the Remphan star is the star that the Jews were worshiping, that God was furious with the Jews for worshiping because it was a false
Mm.
idol. And in the book of Revelation, it says that they're fake Jews, just like the book of Romans, just like in the book of Acts, that these people that pretend to be Jews and pretend to be poor when they're wealthy and they're not actually Jews and they're not actually poor, They are the synagogue of Satan. People say, well, that's that really anti-Semitic
Mm.
book. You mean Revelation? You mean in Revelation where it says that? So if you read the Bible, there's this clear indication that there is a very wicked group of people that pretend to
Yes.
be Jewish that are not Jewish.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's the first thing. And Semitism would include all of the Arab world. If you are Arab, you are a Semite. There are dozens of
Hmm.
tribes. Muslims are Semites. Every Muslim you meet who is Muslim by birth, in terms of their genetics and their lineage, are by definition Semitic. Okay, and it's weird in Judaism if your mother is not Jewish, you're not considered Jewish, even if you are of the bloodline. So it's a very confusing thing. All that's really important to define that before we can even go any further into trying to understand what all this stuff is. If you go back to, you and your audience are obviously probably very familiar with the Rothschilds, and the Rothschild dynasty began in the 1700s in Frankfurt, Germany. In 1775, there were anti-Semitic laws preventing Jews from doing things in Germany. In 1775. This is not something that began in the 20s and 30s in Germany. This is something that goes back hundreds of years. There were anti-Semitic laws that were enacted in Russia in the late 1800s, before the turn of the century. This is something that's been going on for a very long time. Now, we could explore why that is. One of the reasons could be because, well, Jews or gypsies usually had very strange customs, and they were strange to every culture. And these people, well, I could give you an example of one of the customs. It's called Metz Bepeh. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't speak Hebrew. I'm not a Semite. But if you go to the New York City website for health, you could just type in NYC Health Department, and you could type in bris, I
Hmm.
think. But you can read this on the New York City Health Department. It's called direct oral suctioning,
Mm.
where
Yeah, yeah.
the mole cuts the baby's penis and then drinks, or basically sucks the blood out of the baby's penis. If you were a foreign people that came into a city and one of your rituals was to drink the blood out of a child's penis, I'm pretty sure people might see you as a demon. You probably would be looked at, right, as some kind of evil, wicked
100%, man.
monster.
100%.
Which is why, if you look at the Infernal Dictionary, which was written in the late 1800s, okay, a lot of these demons, Baal, Moloch, the famous Baal, Moloch, or any of them, Belphegor, Uranome, the list goes on and on. A lot of them look like rabbis with horns on
Mm.
their head,
Mm.
because the caricature of the anti-Semitic thing that we thought started in Germany goes back hundreds of years, because it's not that Jews were portrayed as demons. It's that demons were things that were from the outside. They were foreigners. That could be a country, it could be a people, it could be a tribe, it could be anything from the outside world. To the Chinese, everything outside of Chinese territory was demonic, in a sense. Okay, outside of Africa, everything was demonic. So if you have this group of people that are in different parts of the world and they're traveling all about and they don't really have a home and they have these bizarre rituals, okay, bizarre by whatever definition, everywhere they go, they're going to be portrayed just like Duplancy portrays them. That's where we get the caricature from. That's where we also get the idea of, well, what do Jewish people tend to go into? Well, historically in the Bible, Christians are not allowed to loan money at interest. Jews are. In canon law later, much, much later, I'd say more recently, closer to our time than the time of Jesus, the church said that Christians are not allowed to loan money at interest. They're not allowed to engage in usury. Okay, Jews are, because they didn't follow canon law. In the Quran, it says that Muslims are not allowed to loan money at interest and engage in usury. In fact, they condemn anybody who does that to basically burning in hell eternally. This is eternal damnation for you engaging in usury. Jews don't have that restriction. So it's acceptable for Jews to engage in interest. This is not a theory. A rabbi pointed this out to me. This is why Jewish people tend to get into banking, because it was a field that was considered wrong for anybody else. It was immoral, unethical. It was gross. I mean, if you don't believe me as a listener, or you, Chris, you could just look up
Oh, I'm
Rolling
very familiar
Stone.
with this, but
You're
yeah,
familiar with this, yeah.
yeah,
And I wasn't suggesting that you don't believe me. I'm just saying, like, if anybody
right.
doesn't, you could just look this up, read the rabbi's article in Rolling Stone
Mm-hmm.
about it. Same thing with entertainment. Entertainment, not in those days, wouldn't have been movies, but it would have been like acting and plays and just traveling entertainment, like a traveling circus. That was something that Christians and Muslims did not engage in. Jews did. So over time, Jews did become bankers. Jews did become entertainers. Jews did eventually take control. I mean, I actually learned this in film school, man. I learned in film school that other than Charlie Chaplin, and he might have even been Jewish, I don't think he was, but other than Charlie Chaplin, every movie house in Hollywood was run by Jewish people. It's because that was the only field that was really acceptable for Jews to engage in outside of banking. But then the banks also collude with the movie houses, and that's why you just see this endless stream of garbage that comes out of Hollywood because it has an endless financial base. It doesn't matter if you go see
Mm,
it or not.
yeah.
Okay, in understanding that, we see that there are these anti-Semitic laws that are put in place. We see the caricature of the Jew that developed. We see Jews also get into what? Law. Jews get into things like medicine. There's nothing wrong with that. So do Hindus. So do Chinese. It's a cultural thing. These are good jobs. That's a
And
good
again, I
thing.
like to remind
But
this is
what
not speaking to the Jewish people. This is to the small group of powerful individuals that they're trying to currently take over the world and have been since the dawning of whatever this group of powerful people are. And it's not any specific race, it's not any specific religion. They, like you said, have some very dark practices that most of the rest of the world is not down with, and they're trying to subject and force the world to be a part of it all as we speak, because at some point this group became very powerful and infiltrated all the other groups globally, and it just became this network. And now this network is trying to protect itself with terms like anti-Semitism, which makes this a very dangerous conversation. So I just had to throw that out there.
I know it's almost like you have to add in some kind of disclaimer every 30 seconds in a conversation like this because people
Yeah,
panic,
yeah.
right? So what do we call bankers? What do we call lawyers? What do we call these people? We call them
Mm,
bloodsuckers. That's a colloquial term we use. Well, what's a bloodsucker? Vampire. And what would that probably derive from? Well, maybe the practice of sucking the blood out of a child, right? So they call that blood libel. Once again, it's not blood libel, it's a historical fact, and it's on the New York City Department of Health website. Okay, so understanding all that, we can go to that question of what you brought up with Hitler and why there's this resurgence of, oh, Hitler
mm,
was right. It wasn't just the chatbot. I don't think it's necessarily right wing groups. I think even left wingers think this too. But yes, there are a lot of people that are going back. I just talked about this on one of my shows on the Secret Teachings. A lot of people are going back and saying, "Oh, maybe Hitler was right." See, this is kind of the problem. If you look at what's happening in Europe, and if you look at what's happening in the UK in particular, there's a movement of anti-immigration sentiment.
mhm.
People are tired of the
Right.
illegal immigration. But when you isolate an individual and you talk to them, okay, there's a difference the average person understands. I think almost everybody understands. There's a difference between legal and illegal immigration, right? But when people are worked up and they're going to hotels to rip migrants out of the hotels, and they're going to beat people up or whatever it is that they're doing. They're tired of the illegal immigrant. They're tired of being treated like second, third, or fourth class citizens in their own
Mhm.
country. They don't distinguish between what's legal and illegal. And right now, their attention is focused on Muslims. Oh, it's the Muslims that are the problem. Oh, and there absolutely are radical, crazy, psychotic
Mhm.
Muslims. Okay. But there are radical, crazy, psychotic Christians. And I know that it's not acceptable to say this, but I will say that there are radical, crazy, psychotic Jews as
Mhm.
well. Okay, now this all I think comes together because if you look at World War II and prior to World War II, and if you look at the 1920s in Germany, there was a big problem in Germany. The problem in Germany began in the late or the early 20s and the late 20, it peaked in the late 20s. So after World War One, Germany is broke. Germany is in ruins essentially. They were made to take responsibility for this First World War, and communists tried. their Bolshevik revolution
Yeah.
in Germany, like they did in Russia. It didn't take. So instead, they engaged in other practices. They took control of schools, they took control of medicine and the legal system, and the Sexual Institute of Science, or the Institute of Sexual Science, run by Magnus
Mm.
Hirschfeld. The schools in Berlin, the Red schools, all of them, this isn't a theory, all of them were run by Jewish people. So you can see that if you're the public sitting back and looking at the illegal immigration today, what do you see? You see Hajibs, you see Muslims, and you say it's the Muslims that are the problem. You don't distinguish between your average Muslim and what you see, which most of those people aren't even Muslims. They're just wearing, I mean, I've seen people arrested at universities that were wearing headscarves, and they take the headscarves off and they have
Mm.
yarmulkes on. Okay, so it's not like they're all Muslim. Okay, so that's really important, because in Germany in the 30s, when people finally got fed up with the illegal immigration and with all the perversity and the smut, Berlin became the hub of the gay movement in the 20s. Pornography, the degrading of the
Mm.
family, uh, child abuse, like child pornography, pedophilia, these things became huge in Germany in the 20s. People rebelled against that. Hitler was elected unanimously because he was a populist who said, we are done with this
Mm.
garbage. He wrote Mein Kampf. I've read it. That's what he talks about. Now, the Holocaust, get this, the Holocaust Encyclopedia says, if you go online and read the Holocaust Encyclopedia, it says that no, the Nazis never had an intention to kill Jews. In fact, they tried to encourage Jews to immigrate out of the Reich. Why? Because they were there illegally. Most of them were illegal immigrants into Germany. When the encouragement failed, this is the Holocaust Encyclopedia speaking, not me. When the encouragement failed, they moved to more aggressive tactics, like forcing them to leave. Those tactics involved rounding them up and putting them in camps that were transitory camps that eventually led to what we know as Israel today. And that was an agreement made called Havara
Yeah.
between the Nazi establishment and the Palestinian Authority to found the state of Israel, which also came from the Balfour Declaration of the British, right? So when that was going on, there was also this ongoing communist revolutionary. They were called the Anti-Fascist Action League, and they were the precursor to the modern Antifa. And when those people were rounded up and put in prison or in camps, guess what they happened to be? Most of them were Jewish. So they rounded up communists, but most of the communists were Jewish. They rounded up illegal immigrants, but a lot of the illegal immigrants were Jewish. Now, you can see the same thing happening today. We go after Islam.
Mm-hmm.
We go after it's the Muslims, it's the Muslims, it's the Muslims. Now, that could break two ways. That could break one way where we start rounding Muslims up and we start a holy war, or it could break the other way. And when people read about HIAS, the group that's facilitating the illegal immigration to the US and the UK, you realize, oh, HIAS is a Jewish group. We might turn our attention to Jewish people and say they're the problem. They're creating this problem. It's not the Muslims, and go after them instead. So there are two horrible things that could happen here where we eventually we get to a point where we target an individual. We've already done that with Islam, and we're either going to continue doing that with Islam and go to war with the Islamic world, or we're going to turn our attention to Jews and go to war with the Jewish world. And we're going to see the same thing happen that we saw in the 20s, 30s, and 40s in Europe and also globally. This is so dangerous, okay? This is so incredibly
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. And if you look at the history of this, you realize even the Encyclopedia of the Holocaust and Holocaust museums admit this. The Nazis never had an intention to kill Jews. They were trying to move the illegal immigrants out of their country. So if you go back and you say Hitler was right about that, he was right about that. They didn't want illegal immigrants in their country. That was one of the big issues. They didn't want all this garbage in their media. It was smut. It was pornography. It was degrading German women. It was degrading German families. It was teaching children that sex with adults was okay. Hitler banned, that's what the first books they banned were that material. So if you look at what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida, he's not, I don't think he's an extreme far right winger. He's an average guy who said, we're not going to put this smut and perversity in the schools. We are banning these books. We can't have pornography given to children.
Mm.
And people say, just like Hitler. Actually, yeah, that's accurate. He is just like Hitler because Hitler banned the pornography and the smut for kids. That's exactly accurate. Now, that doesn't mean that what Hitler did after that was right. Okay, but again, people don't, like with the legal and illegal immigration, when they're worked up in a mob, they don't distinguish between Hitler being right about banning the pornography and the smut and ending this movement to make everybody gay in Germany, because that was what the movement was. Like, everybody's gay, everybody has sex with everybody. It was just basically worse than a Roman orgy. You go beyond that, and things, when you can't get the people out of your country, when you're going to war with them in your country, when there's basically a civil war breaking out, when you have communist subversive movements like Antifa, which is, again, 1930s Germany. That's where they come from. You can look up their flag. It's the identical flag, except it has two red flags rather than a red and black flag. Now they're like anarcho-communists. You look through all that, it's like, well, clearly the Nazis didn't just come to power one day and thought, okay, we hate Jews, we're going to kill Jews. It's not that simple. And the simple fact that history has shown us that through all the book, like, historians have told us that, movies have told us that. Oh, there was no reason for the Nazis hating Jews. There was no reason for the Nazis to do what they did. No, there's always a reason. And when you understand that reason, a couple of things happen. You either think, well, Hitler was right, which is insane. Hitler was not right, but he was right about a few things. Hell, even Joe Biden was right about a few things. Barack Obama was right about a few. Bush was right about a few things. A broken clock is accurate a couple of times, right? So it's the same kind of a thing. And I think the overlying point, to conclude my thoughts on this, and maybe I would love to see what you think about what I'm saying, because I understand how offensive, and everybody's like, oh my God, I don't want to hear this. I think the point is, you cannot ignore the important contextual details of history, because due to the fact that we have ignored that, or we've had it kept from us, we are in a position now to repeat it, and to repeat it in ways that are far worse than anything the Nazis did. Far worse than anything the Nazis did, because the Nazis did not have the spy system that we have, the technology that we have. If you look at what the White House alone has done, colluding with pharmaceutical companies, paying influencers to promote those products, or colluding with corporations like Amazon to censor certain books, or colluding with the media and forcing them and basically demanding and instructing them to censor certain stories. Those are the definitions of fascism according to Benito Mussolini. So that's not even something that people recognize, because nobody reports on that hardly. You don't read about that until there's a lawsuit, or until some citizen journalist finds the documents and points it out. In Germany, they were very proud of what they were doing, and the people were mostly behind it. Today, there's no pride in what they're doing. I mean, except for the pride movement. Today, it's just, no, we didn't do anything. We're fighting the fascists. We believe in equality. Yeah, well, it's like George Carlin said, when fascism comes to America, it's going to come with a smiley face T-shirt. This is the danger that we face today,
Yeah,
Chris.
I am right on board with all of that, man. The problem with even trying to get into a deep understanding with all of this is, once you can see what's unfolding, you can't go back. That's first of all. And the question is, how do you navigate forward from here amongst the polarities? You can try and stay in the middle ground as much as possible, but then the dark polarities get darker and darker, to where it becomes impossible to even remotely align with some of the ideologies that keep you in the middle. So you're pushed further and further to that side that has extremes, fundamentalist extremes that cause problems on the far right side, on the side that is seemingly more on the side of humanity than the other. So it becomes extremely difficult to navigate this, and the more it unfolds, the more it seems that ultimately, if we don't pick a side, it either means destruction or exile, or your life is not going to be made easy at the least. So we're in a very extremely important, interesting times, and this is such an important discussion. Yes, that's what happens. So, this is, I think these discussions are essential right now, so that we can first of all, become aware of what's happening and then make our decisions on how to navigate based on that. And some of these truths hurt, but they are truths nonetheless, and we all need to hear them right now. So, Ryan, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Is there anything else that you'd like to throw out there before we close out today?
Yeah, if you don't mind, there's one other example I wanted to give. So if you look at the more polarity between Russia, Ukraine, and how the Democrats support that, and Republicans perceptually are opposed to it, but they actually participate by continuing to give them money and weapons. But on the surface, Republicans are against it. Israel, Palestine, Democrats are opposed to it, but the Republicans are for it. And the Democrats, even though they're opposed to it, a lot of them are very opposed to it on the surface. A lot of Democrats also support it, give them weapons, give them money. So I think the polarity there is interesting because this is what I wanted to point out to you. I think it was the Jerusalem Post that reported this. 50% plus of every campaign dollar that goes into the Democrat coffer comes from a member of the Jewish group. Okay, Jews account for 50% of all the donations to the Democrat Party, or more. Why is it then that the Democrats perceptually hate Israel? That's a weird question I've been grappling with. Why is that? And why is it that when we learned about the Sam Bankman-Fried FTX scam, we learned that all this money that was being given to Ukraine, and the Republicans that are like, no more money to Ukraine. Why is it that Republicans were getting kickbacks from that money that was laundered to Ukraine that was ending up back into the pockets of members of Congress, Republican and Democrat?
Kind of makes you have to ask the question, is there a puppet master pulling strings on both sides right now? I mean, that's what everything points to.
It sounds like that. It does sound like that, doesn't it? And I should ask, rhetorically, I should ask this. Does anybody know where the gay capital of the world is today? It's not a derogatory thing. It's just a real question. Like, the gay capital of the world today is Tel Aviv, Israel.
I heard this.
25%.
Yeah.
You've heard this. 25% of the population is homosexual or LGBTQ. That's 1 out of 4. That's the largest of any population in the world. Like, it's 1 to 2%, maybe 5% in some places. But like San Francisco, you might get a higher percentage. But it's 1 out of 4 in Tel Aviv. Do you know where the gay capital of the world was in the 1920s? Berlin.
Interesting.
Communist Berlin was the gay capital. So what is the main focus of the Democrat Party? They're focused on a couple of big things: immigration, abortion, LGBTQ. Okay? So immigration is being run by Hayes, largely in the US and the UK. That is a Jewish group. Abortion, well, the Talmud says that the fundamentalists, the fundamentalist Jewish people can kill Gentiles and it's acceptable. Who are most of the abortions performed on? Well, they're actually 40% of them are black women, but the rest of them are Hispanic and white and others. And that would mean that we have a lot of Gentile babies killed. But the Democrats are big supporters of that. And they're also big supporters of LGBTQ. Where's the capital of that? Tel Aviv, Israel. So don't sit there for a minute and suggest to me that the Democrats are opposed in any way, shape, or form to Israel. They work for Israel more than the Republicans do. And I think that that's statistically and financially verifiable, too, because the Republicans only receive about 25% of their money from Israel. 50+% from Democrats, or for Democrats, comes from Israel. And they just happen to support abortion and immigration and LGBTQ, 3 big issues in Israel. I don't find that to be coincidental. And I also don't find it to be coincidental that why the Republicans run around saying, we got to support Israel, or the Democrats run around saying we got to support Ukraine. Ukraine also is being built into what Zelensky, who's Jewish, says is the greater Israel. So I don't understand why at the center of all this, it just seems to be a dog and pony show for a very small group of people that take on an identity that has nothing to do with a religion. There is and for the record too, if you go back and you read the Talmud and the Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin was the board of the rabbis. All the rabbis had to be well versed in one thing: black magic. They had to be necromancers. They had to understand how to do these things. I think that has spilt over into the world today. I think that that's when we see this kind of perverse, disgusting crap on TV and in media, there is a powerful force that, like Churchill said, wants to destroy civilization. It doesn't matter if it's in Israel and Palestine. It doesn't matter if it's Ukraine, Russia. They want war. And by God, the last time that this stuff became popular and trending, which the Talmud was trending on Twitter last week, or X, we had a global conflict. And I do not think that we are going to escape another global conflict. I think we're going to see a global war sooner than later because of these conditions, because of how obvious it's becoming that there is this black, powerful black magic force that's operating behind. These people do not. I mean, look. Last thing, look at what happened in Ukraine. I mean, the Russians even pointed this out. The Azov battalion, which are literal Nazis, the Azov battalion that works under Zelensky, they perform old Nazi rituals. There's videos of this. They use black magic symbols on their barracks. This is not just a political war or a physical war. This is a magical war, a supernatural war. It's not something that's confined to the battlefield of brother versus brother, father versus son or something. This is a very dark supernatural thing. So on that note, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. If anybody wants to reach out to me, my email is tstradio@protonmail.com. The website is thesecretteachings.info. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. This is a spiritual battle that we're fighting, and that is, to me, one of the most important aspects to get across to people. So this is something that we have to face, and even if you don't believe in those spiritual, ritualistic practices, very powerful people do, and they are using it as we speak. So there's always that aspect. Ryan, thank you so much. We will definitely be talking again, and until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see you then.